Today I'm diving into something that's been a game changer for me this year. We are pulling back the curtain on something very sly. Those kind of questions feel more like traps than curiosity. You know, the very particular questions, the ones where you scramble for an answer that feel a little bit just too pointed, the kind of question that land just a little too hard and leave you questioning why you're explaining yourself in the first place. And also, like, how is that question actually meant? What if I told you that you don't know anyone an answer, especially when the question itself is doing more harm than good? What if the power, the real power, isn't in defending yourself, but in actually changing the conversation and flipping the script? Today's episode is all about the art of counter-question, a skill that can turn the tables in any kind of conversation, whether it's a casual chat or a high-stakes moment for you. We will break down why it works, how to spot those subtle verbal traps, and how to respond in a way that keeps your power firmly in your hands. And by the end of the episode, you will have a fresh and very bold perspective on how to hold your ground in an authentic way and rewrite the rules of engagement, namely in your way. So without further ado, welcome to I Do Me Boo. You probably heard it 100 million times since childhood. Never answer a question with a question. It's practically a golden rule of polite conversation, and I call bullshit on that. I don't like that rule at all, and I never understood why I can't, in a polite conversation, in a good conversation, not answer a question with a counter question. Like, let's break down the power of this so-called counter question. I want to ask you, have you ever been asked a question that stops you basically in your tracks? And not because you don't know the answer, but because something feels off? Maybe your gut is telling you or asking you, why are they even asking me this? Maybe you feel an urge to defend yourself or explain something you don't even need to justify. And let me tell you, not every question deserves your straightforward answer. I have observed this year specifically, me entering in my absolute authentic era, that not every question someone gets asked or I got asked is innocent. There are questions that are loaded. And what I mean by that is that they poke at your insecurities. They steer you into an uncomfortable corner. They make you answer something that you regret answering in the first place, or you end up even second-guessing yourself by answering the question. And I want to tell you with this podcast that you don't have to play along. I have been asked this year why I'm working with women only. And let me tell you, this question was, from my gut feeling, not the most innocent question. I felt it was loaded. And I have questions that I'm asking to clarify how that question was meant. Because maybe I perceive as it's loaded and maybe it's not. And I want to make sure that that person reveals to me what's the curiosity behind this question. What is the intent behind that question? What's the concern maybe behind that question? And I'd rather clarify and ask that instead of me running into my own deceitful perception where I feel like it's loaded, or where I'm actually gaslighting myself and say, oh, it's not loaded. It's just maybe my perception. I fumble for an answer and answer it and then get myself cornered, or I say something that I regret. So there was also research behind this whole thing. And that's where it gets really juicy. So studies on conversation dynamics show that asking thoughtful, clarifying questions shift the power in a conversation. And according to research in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, says that asking a question back when you are put on the spot allows you to regain control of the whole conversation, while it reduces, obviously, this likelihood of defensiveness. I see this so often that people ask a question and somebody else is responding in a very defensive manner. And let me tell you from what I've observed, those people who respond in a very defensive manner are often perceived, and not only often perceived, they are the weaker part of that conversation. They lose a lot of credibility. Defensiveness is not a good way to go about it. And I know that we are all trapped sometimes in defending ourselves, where there is no need to defend. So, psychologists have also found out that when you respond with a curiosity rather than compliance, and compliance meaning like, oh, okay, someone asked me something, so I have to respond, because you don't have to respond with an actual answer. It signals self-assurance and really a very grounded, a very authentic authority. And that very energy, I tell you, my love, that is so magnetic. It's how leaders hold a room. It's even like holding this, like that room when it is a dicey kind of conversation, when it's a difficult conversation. Then we have all been there. So what I want to tell you is how to not lose your power. And I want you to take this episode with you into the new year and really practice this, because this works so magically. So what do you do when you feel that gut nudge that I was telling before? Like in that moment where something about the question that you got doesn't sit right. You don't rush to answer. And this is something that you need to intentionally practice, because we are so conditioned, especially look back into your school days when you were taking 2, 3, 4 seconds to answer a question. Your teacher might probably have thought that you don't know it, or would go on to the next person. So we are so trained from small age on to just scramble for an answer, and to better say something than not say something, or respond at least immediately. So I want you to practice not to rush into the answer. Take a pause, take a beat. And I know it's difficult because our nervous system is like, oh, someone asks me something, I need to rush into giving information. So practice taking a moment to really let that question land in your body, and your body knows, your gut feeling knows if that is an intention well meant, or if it's a question that has no well meaning or might be loaded, you're not sure about it. Clarify. And clarify that by asking that specific counter question. So I have around 3 examples that I have in my back pocket that I'm really trained myself to learn, so that the next time I get a question and I don't know how it's meant, that I can ask back. So one of the most powerful counter questions that I have for you is to say, that is an interesting question. Can I ask what made you curious about it? That is my absolute number one. Because, yeah, I can say that this question is interesting. And then I also can say, or can ask, like, what made you so curious about that? Another question that I ask back, if I want to clarify, what's the intention? Why was that asked in the first place? I don't ask why, because we know why questions often, let's put it this way. Why questions usually, put people on the spot to justify themselves. I kind of don't want to use why too often. So what I say is, I'd love to understand what's prompting you to ask this. That is also such a good counter question. And the last one that I'm using once in a while is, before I answer, can you help me understand what you are looking to know here? And this is so good. And I tell you why these questions work so well. These responses are powerful because of 2 things. First, they really shift their focus from you back to the other person who is asking the question. And it's actually forcing them to clarify their intent. And the other thing why those questions are so powerful is they buy you time. And that is what you need to take a breather, to kind of gather your thoughts, to process without fumbling for an answer or feeling cornered, or where you have this bodily reaction of like you contract and then you're getting hot and then you're getting cold and then you get like sweaty and you feel like you're blanking. So asking one of those three counter questions is such a beautiful way of buying you time, and I think that is something that we all need. And obviously, again, it's so important to clarify when we don't understand what's the reason, the intention, why someone is asking you this. And here's also the kicker. Asking a counter question is not rude. It's also not evasive. If someone responds to that you should not answer a question with a counter question, insist on finding it out. You can reframe what you just said, but repeat yourself. Insist on getting the information. And a counter question is just a discernment tool. It helps you gauge the person's intent, and also whether the question is genuine or if there's something else going on. Because if the question was innocent, the person will explain themselves and you can move forward with clarity and you move on and it's done. But if the question wasn't innocent, then great. You have just thrown the ball back into their court without losing your ground, without losing your footing. And I also want to tell you why this matters for your authenticity. Answering every question immediately, even the ones that feel off, especially the ones that feel off. I mean, nothing to say if you feel like someone asks you a question and you have an answer and it's a good conversation, let's go for it. But the one that actually feels off, the one where you fumble for an answer, that can put you in a position where you are oversharing, where you are over-explaining yourself, or even justifying yourself, but it's unnecessarily justifying yourself. And when you do that, you give away a little piece of your power. You're crushing a little bit of your, crushing a piece of your soul. And authenticity doesn't mean that you being an open book to everyone, that you are answering all the questions. It really means knowing when and where you share your truth and not being afraid to challenge when something doesn't feel right. We women need to challenge more each other. I mean, also yourself, right? We're challenging ourselves. It's also important, but don't shy away by challenging someone's assumption or question. That is so important. And when you pause and respond with curiosity, instead of this automatic defensiveness, and I know it's a practice, I know it's difficult, I have been there and I've managed, I've been one of the most defensive persons you will have ever known. I've really been terribly defensive. And now I switched that with practice back to curiosity. And when you do that, when you switch from defensiveness to curiosity, you are staying in your fucking control of the conversation. And you're also staying so true to yourself. And that is such a powerful, authentic act. So here's my challenge to you as we wrap up today's episode. The next time someone asks you a question that triggers that little nudge of doubt or discomfort, pause. Breathe. Don't rush to answer. Instead, ask yourself, what is this really about? Then reclaim your power with a question of your own. And whether you're using my other three questions that I outlined before, that's an interesting question. Can I ask you what made you curious about that? I'd love to understand what's prompting you to ask this? Or before I answer, can you help me understand what you're looking to know here? So you can reformulate, you can bring up your own answers, but make sure you have at least one handy. Because in the situation where you're caught off guard, very often we go blank and we don't have anything to say. But one of those questions that you come up with your own or you learn from me can help you buy time, as we said, and it's also helping to get you clarity. And remember, you're not obligated to explain yourself to anyone who asks. That is your golden rule, okay? So that's it for today, my love. Until next time, I hope that was a useful conversation today. And yeah, I just want you to stay bold and authentic and always choose bravery over compliance. So I'll catch you on the next episode of the I Do Me Boo podcast. So thank you for tuning in. If you feel like this is a podcast that can serve somebody of your loved ones, friends, forward them the episode. And if you have any questions or want to comment, please feel free to DM me on Instagram @FemMagical. And thank you for tuning in. Bye, my love.